things are really not going well in the Conservative world because has been now almost 100 days. It has been 100 days since Kemi Badenoch officially took over the leadership of the Conservative Party, and she promised big things, big changes. But what exactly has she done? What exactly has she done to change the party? Well, internally, she's done nothing internally within the party. And then when it comes to the actual party itself, there's no policy. She has made no policy descriptions, what policy she intends to do, if she should become leader of, prime minister of the country. This has left many Conservatives just scrambling because they've got nothing to talk about. Since she became leader, what can we discuss? Her performance at PMQs has continuously been gone from disaster to disaster. She has made, if not one of the most cringiest speeches I think I have ever seen a Conservative leader ever make, although that was in America, done for an American Conservative audience, but it was bad. It was incredibly bad. Not only that, but they are tanking in the popularity polls versus, of course, Reform. And of course, at any general election, those two parties are competing for that right-wing block of ever shrinking, ever decreasing voters. Meanwhile, of course, as we talked about last time, her popularity tanked in the last Conservative home poll post. Well, guess what has happened today with the new poll? She is down now by 19 points. So her popularity amongst Conservative Party members is flatlining. Like, she is in she was already in choppy waters. We are now seeing very, very bad reactions to this, but also interestingly as well. In fact, I want to show you this before we actually get into the article properly. Very first ever time I have ever seen anyone mention the Lib Dems. And it happens 2 times actually in this. You're not talking about the Lib Dems. What about the Lib Dems? There are just a handful of Reform MPs, but there are lots of Lib Dems who took our seats the last election. Be sure to concentrate on the main enemy. Someone else mentioned it down here. 6 mentions of reforms, but none of the Lib Dems. Mr. Atkinson is panicking about one flank, but doing nothing. But do the constituencies like Witney, Surrey Heath, Turnbridge, and Richmond, etc., actually count too? And we've said this time and time again, that if you concentrate too much on reform, a lot of your members, well, where do they go? They go to the Lib Dems. That's already happened. That's already happening. All the more moderate Tories are either going, we ain't voting for this party at all, we're just gonna leave and see what happens, or they've gone to the Lib Dems. A lot more of them have gone to the Lib Dems by the looks of it. So you are getting an abandonment, very, very much so. But it's the first time, interestingly, I have actually seen comments on Conservative Home saying, why are we concentrating so much on reform when there's all these Lib Dems here that are also flanking us on this side? Are we not worried about that? Should we not be doing something about that, instead of talking about reform? So we're going to have a look at what Will has said today, because it is, again, wonderful. More panic, of course, from Will about, of course, the popularity of his leader, of course, the Kemi Badenoch now, and what potentially might happen should she, well, as Will says in a moment, it is not a matter of if she will leave or when she leaves, or if she gets forced out, but a matter of when. Yeah, I think we can see the writing on the wall now. Kemi Kemi Badenoch may not last the year, which is insane to think. Insane to think. But we could very well be seeing Robert Jerrick in position. And of course, Jerrick won't do any much better. If the Jerrick supporters think that somehow Jerrick's going to be better than Kemi Badenoch, he would be doing exactly the same. You'll just be making things a lot worse in a lot of different ways. But there you go. So anyway, we're going to get onto this. But before we do that, like I say, click the like, click the share button. Down below, of course, there's the Patreon page, there's a Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. So does Badenoch actually want to lead the Conservative Party? Which is an interesting question to start off your article with, where Will. This seems a bizarre question to ask. After all, it is not that easy to climb to the top of the greasy pole. Even with a lackadaisical approach to campaigning for the job, Badenoch still needs to win over enough MPs and party members to to be at the top. Then again, she was running a far closer than 2 years ago, as the frontrunner might have at least expected her to do. However, the movement is now losing its touch. Like I say, if you look at the latest poll on Conservative Home, she's down by 19 points. She is tanking in the leadership polls. And guess who's at the top this time? It's not Mel Stride, it's Robert Jerrick at the top. Looks like a lot of Conservative Party members are now having buyer's remorse over Kemi Badenoch. But trust me, if the flip side had happened, let's say Jerrick had won instead of Badenoch, they'd all be having buyer's remorse right now over Jerrick and wanting Kemi Badenoch instead. So there you go. But Will continues. She still won, even though it wasn't a smooth coronation as she might have hoped for. So, after going through all that trouble, one would assume that there is at least part of her that wants to be our leader. But unless she is just playing a grand practical joke upon her colleagues, that's a very good assessment of your political party leader there, Will. One would actually struggle to explain her performances like at that last week's PMQ without now pinning it now on a fundamental disinterest. She achieved what might have been thought impossible. She made Keir Starmer look good. Keir Starmer has been doing very well in PMQs, and it's not just this one where he's made a look bad, shall we say. She pinned her hopes, as Will continues, on the hopes of the Prime Minister saying what she wanted about the Gazan refugees, and then appeared completely dumbfounded and defensive when he did not. He ran rings around her as she then accused him of failing to answer a question that she had. Was she just on autopilot, unable to even adapt or even improvise? Well, here's the thing. Her performance at PMQs was one of the big questions a lot of people, and even as we went through articles at the time on this, were worried about, that she could not perform under pressure, that in that environment of PMQs, that she was not suitable for it, that she couldn't, or if she could, maybe there was hope that she might learn on the job, but it doesn't seem to be improving, not only in this, but even in television interviews. This is why Jerrick has been trying to get more TV interviews and appearances, but he's being blocked apparently by Kemi Badenoch from doing so, which is, again, some interesting internal stuff going on in the party there. It was then compounded, of course, by the final question about a civil servant working from home that Starmer had summarily dismissed. The various reports about her PMQ's prep seemed to now be ringing true. It had been seen that she now does not properly prepare, confident as she is in abilities, that she has now failed to consult those who had helped our previous party leaders, and that she is now surrounded by sycophants. Gee, this was only one of the big concerns that was being raised, that her current cabinet is all her allies. Gee, where have we heard this before? Where I can't think that maybe a political party where you have a leader who appoints her own allies might be seen as a bit of a political problem when you start to get into, problems because you have allies who are just going to go, yes, you are wonderful, you are great, don't worry about what everyone else is saying, just listen to us and promote us. Very interesting indeed, but they haven't learnt their lesson at all from the Boris years. Now, some close to her have even made it clear to me that she needs to improve her prep in recent weeks. But what I read that she was now disinterested in asking for William Hague's advice as to how to perform at the dispatch box, I despaired. Yes, he was far from our most electorally successful leader, but he did, by common consensus, run rings around Tony Blair at PMQ for 4 years. So she's not even seeking advice from someone who, according to all the party, was, at least good at PMQs. That's bad. So whether she likes it or not, Badenoch is one big job has a week. And even if few voters actually prioritize it at the ballot box, her 6 questions are her at least one guaranteed moment in the spotlight. A chance to actually contrast herself to Starmer, humiliate his government, or push our attack lines and cheer on her weary colleagues. Her predecessors in this role have understood this and have taken now it sufficiently seriously. So already she is underperforming. This is nothing new. These concerns about her were expressed multiple times in the run-up to the leadership contest, during the leadership contest. And guess what? All those people expressing those concerns have been proven right about this. None of this is new. But however heroically CCHQ tries to cover for her underwhelming performances by putting out Kemi-owned Starmer YouTube clips, the cracks are now starting to show. She was elected because she was supposedly now to take the fight to Starmer, and he can't believe his luck. Labour types were very relieved when she won. They seem to have seen her faults far more clearly than we did. Oh no, her faults were there for everyone to see, Will. This is nothing new. No one should be shocked by how bad Kemi Badenoch is failing. Like, all of these faults were there for everyone to clearly see, and they were addressed by people about concerns about her running for party leader. However, no one decided to bring up any of these concerns because you all decided that you aren't allowed to attack each other. That there needs to be, thou shalt not attack a fellow conservative, decided by the saint of the North, Ben Houchen. This is why I think the next leadership contest is going to be a lot more brutal. You could forget any truces happening this time. I don't think there will be this time. And if there is one, I don't think it will hold this time. Because I think it is very clear that if Kemi Badenoch had been seriously challenged, all these faults would have become very clear. They would have become very evident. She would have not have won. But they didn't, because they all agreed that there needed to be, peace in the Tory party. But once again, you're going to probably end up removing her as leader. There's going to be a civil war, and it depends how brutal the civil war is going to get this time. I hope it gets quite brutal, because compared to last time where I was hoping it was, and it was boring, and I am sorry for, trumping up like it was going to be this great, slobber knocker of a fight. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was kind of very boring. It was very mundane. But, I have hopes for the next one, because I think the next one will be quite brutal indeed. So, back to this. This is why so soon. After reaching out only 100 days in the role, speculation is now rife as to whether Badenoch will actually reach her double centenary. As Toby McTaggart suggests, one does not go as far as Dominic Cummings in branding her a completely useless dud who needs to be removed ASAP to agree that there is now substance to his condemnation of Badenoch's leadership so far. So you now have people saying, yeah, Dominic Cummings is right of his assessment. She's a completely useless dud. uh, there were so many critics of Badenoch out there saying about her, but they were just ignored, and it was kind of insane. But if someone had seriously challenged her during like those leadership debates or anything like that, this would have been exposed. This would have been shown. Cleverly should have done it, or Jarek maybe should have done it if he wanted to win, but no, that did not happen. Because they all agreed, oh, we can't be seen fighting now. We can't be seen fighting now. But again, all those rifts, all those problems still exist in the Conservative Party. None of those problems have been solved. They are still there. The only reason they are not exploding at the moment is because Kemi has not come out and said, this is what our policy is. So there is no, where the fault line is, where do we put the policy, So we'll see what happens on that. But her doing nothing, which is pretty much how it's been interpreted by people in the Conservative Party, do not seem to be very happy that she's sitting doing nothing. Anyway, Will continues. Reading, of course, the ever excellent Tally Fraser's profile of Badenoch's tenure so far does give us a very fascinating insight into a parallel universe inhabited by our leader and her team. In this world, Reform UK is a temporary phenomenon, not a party that has actually pushed us into third and is taking our voters, members, and donors very quickly. Again, I'll trust. I can't. Sometimes you can't pronounce these words. Curse my dyslexia. But there you go. She had 3 years to, of course, prove herself, not 3 months. But of course, reality cannot be fooled. By Nigel Hutchison's own apparent admissions, they are already on track to lose half our councillors, but none of the councillors who are at least contesting. However, the hard CCSQ messages try to message these expectations. The headlines on May the 2nd will read, Reform Surge, Tory Wiped Out, accompanied by a cheering Nigel Farage and a glowering Badenoch. And we'll see what happens with those elections, because remember, 190 something plus by-elections we've had now. Reform have only won 10. It's not exactly good. If you've had all those by-elections in there, I don't think Reform are necessarily going to do as well as people think. They might do, of course. I think the big winners of this, the next one, are going to be the Lib Dems. And I think that moment, maybe both the Reform and Tories might actually start to have to start attacking the Lib Dems. I think maybe those local elections might be their wake-up call. I don't think it necessarily will, because I still think they'll blame each other for not winning that, and they'll just continue to attack each other because they are obsessed with that right-wing vote, of course, that ever-shrinking and decreasing right-wing vote. But this is why in those comments, as we've just shown you at the beginning, the first time ever I've seen people on Conservative Home say, what about those Lib Dems? And I think that's by people who are starting to look at campaigning in their local constituencies and are all of a sudden going, all of a sudden there's a lot of Lib Dem supporters that weren't there before. Where have all these people come from? I think that's what they're experiencing as in these local Conservative parties. So, can this be avoided? Since these elections, of which Angela Rayner has allowed to go ahead, were last contested at the peak of the 2021 vaccine bouse, they would, of course, be difficult for any leader. But it is undoubtedly the case that Badenoch's current strategy is making the situation worse. Voters already hate us. Now they are ignoring us. We are an irrelevance. I agree with you on that. You aren't putting forward your messaging at all in a case because you've got no messaging to put out because of Kemi Badenoch. Anyway, Will continues. If only her strategy now for reaching the electorate to tour our associations and, of course, appear on Boomer podcasts, we will lose. If she continues to plan not to announce any policies until 2027, whilst reform and flood the airwaves, we will lose. If she continues to persist, dreaming that she has 3 years to turn things around, rather than 3 months, we will lose. It is that simple. Yeah. This is why I think they're going to get rid of her sooner rather than later. They are going to get rid of her. And of course, the threshold for the vote has been increased. But even then, that's going to cause a lot of problems, even if she just wins by like a small margin. It will still cause her a lot of problems. It might make her position very much untenable. But yeah, it just shows you the difficulty and trouble that's going to be coming up in probably the next couple of weeks. Certainly when it comes up to these elections. The money will continue to dry up. Talk of a deal with reform will now only increase, but what incentive does Farage have to agree to on? His boot is now on our throats. His ratings are reaching as high as the 20s, and ours dip now into the teens. You don't have to play around with electoral calculus before he gains a majority, and we are now left with under 50 MPs. We still have much, much further to fall. Again, what about the Lib Dems be saying all this? You know, every single time you look at this analysis, it's almost as if everyone just ignores the Lib Dems, but they took more seats from the Tories than the Reform did. And yet, you're not worried about them, which goes to show you a fundamental strategic misthink. You know, you're so worried about, you know, your western flank, but your eastern flank is just as much as a problem. And very quickly, you're going to be finding that eastern flank is a lot closer to home than they're realizing. And I think that's why you are seeing those comments down below that, you know, local Tories have now started to start of look at campaigning and do that type of thing. And they are realizing, oh, there's suddenly a lot more Lib Dems than we originally thought. I think, I keep on saying it. I think the big winners of the local election are going to be the Lib Dems. I think they're going to do a lot better than people are predicting. So, more importantly, Reform's whole USP is that they are not part of the failing, disgraced uniparty establishment. A deal with us would not only spare a party that Farage has spent 30 years campaigning against and is now on the verge of replacing. It would be a repudiation of his voters, members, and MPs. He has no reason to throw us a life draft while he's enjoying watching us drown. Again, the whole this is why we won't get a deal stuff. We've seen that before, but there you go. So if a deal were to happen, it would, of course, be in Reform's interest. They would have to be on the back foot, declining in the polls, under pressure from a resurgent Conservative Party. A few more screw-ups, like their ludicrous net zero announcements, might take the sheen off them. This is the best Badenoch can hope for, to put her faith in Farage, proving now to be worse at leading than her. Yeah, and eventually soon he will do. There's so much stuff, like, you have not heard like a single thing about Farage say anything about like Ukraine or the US Russia talks, but we all saw Julia Hart Brewer, who again very very much a conservative. I don't really give her the time of day, but I'll tell you what, her interview she did with Tim Rice, not Tim Rice, with Richard Trice. Sorry, yeah, I forgot his name then. that really sort of put the foot in that showed that if you drag reform off onto other topics of policy other than immigration, they have nothing to say or very little to say or come across as very bad on those topics. You'd think Badenoch might be trying to force Farage to fight on other grounds where he's at least a lot more vulnerable. But there's no interest in that. And even if Jerrick comes back, but Jerrick's really good on immigration. Well, is he better on immigration compared to Nigel Farage? No. There's all Nigel Farage has to do is go, okay, I'll just go even more right wing. the idea that you can ever outdo Nigel Farage on that topic by appealing to his current position is ridiculous. Because no one will vote for a Poundland version of Nigel Farage when they've got real Nigel Farage at home. It's the Coke versus Diet Coke thing. Why have Diet Coke when you can have the real Coke, essentially? But there you go. Anyway, she might, of course, change. She might improve, as McTarge, of course, tries to do highlight. Margaret Thatcher's, of course, early days were very hardly met with rave reviews. Her indefinite leave to remain announcement showed that the quote no policies until 2027 approach is already wilting under the pressure of events. Perhaps the focus groups are now being listened to. Stop the free speech chatter and start talking to voters. So please don't talk about the culture war stuff because it comes across very, very bad. It is not something that appeals to British voters. But as I speak to MPs and other senior figures, there isn't much hope. Politics is currently being played at 10 times speed. Babbling about principles until the party conference will not attract donors, members, or even optimism that we now desperately require. As myself and the intestinable Tom Jones said, an increasing number are now saying, this is our endgame, the death spasms of 300 years of Toryism. I really hope that's the case because I keep on saying this, because people often ask me, why do you still cover the Conservatives? It is because I think we are witnessing the genuine death of a political party in the UK. And that happens only very, very rarely in our political system. Very rarely indeed. And that is why I want to cover it, because this type of thing does not happen, every day. We are literally talking a once in a blue moon scenario. And right now, we could be very well witnessing the death spasms of 300 years of Toryism. What replaces it? Who knows? Maybe that's another conversation. But until it actually dies, I don't think reform will be sort of filling that gap either. So, which is why this is now the most pressing questions about Badenoch's leadership has already shifted away from if she will go before the next election to now when and who replaces her. I had expected that she would have to wait until next year's local, Scottish, and Welsh elections before she would be in serious trouble. But the timescale keeps on shortening. She might not even make it to the end of summer. Oh, now I'm a bit optimistic. I maybe now don't think, given some of the reactions for her, she might not last the year. But until summer, Will, I think, knows something that maybe might happen. I think he knows that there already might be a movement or some sort of campaign ahead, maybe in the Conservative Party, to maybe see what the reaction to these local elections are going to be. And then put absolute maximum pressure on her to either act or leave. I think that is an interesting admission there from Will, that he's saying that. I think Will knows a lot more that's going on. If he's already said he's been speaking to MPs, he's been speaking to other Conservative Party officials. He clearly knows something might be coming, or at least down the pipe. So, in which case, who's next? James Cleverly, who definitely avoided serving under, and who wouldn't frighten the horses. Robert Jerrick, for whom members already seem to have developed buyer's remorse, as we already said. As he plays the mayor of the palace of Badenoch's, oh, pardon me, to the latest palace of Badenoch's late Merovingian, or Boris Johnson, whom eyes always turn to in a crisis, and whose direction madness lies. It's still shocking. It is still shocking that there are people in the Conservative Party who still think for I don't even know like why you could even make an argument to bring back Boris Johnson. Like I just don't understand why they think there is this argument to bring him back. But it would be an insane move to do that. And I do agree with Will. In that direction, madness does indeed lie. But this the latter now is being blustered now by being outside at least of the Commons. But the usual chorus has already struck up. And to say this, that there's already these conversations happening, the admittance that these conversations are already happening does show the trouble Kemi Badenoch is in, what could be happening, what in literally 2 months' time, 3 months' time, given post local election stuff, that could be, oh boy, things could be about to get spicy very quickly in a couple of months in the Conservative Party. Anyway, so whoever, of course, would replace Badenoch, their only strategy would have to be total media saturation. The adoption of those policies on migration that now thoughtful Conservatives have long since put out there. I love that. Thoughtful Conservatives. Jerrick's position is not, I would say, on migration, quote, thoughtful, at least. Plus, how is Jerrick going to compete against Farage? No one seems to have asked that question, but again, it's a valid question that should have been put to Kemi Badenoch. How are you actually going to take on Nigel Farage and Reform and win back potentially some of those voters? But there you go. So there's thought the Conservatives long since put out there, and of course, a very studious attempt now to blunt Farage's movement. Anything else is suicide. Could it work? Who can say? But if Badenoch doesn't want her MPs to take that gamble, she will have to save her ailing leadership, and fast. Our fourth leadership election in 3 years is not the prospect that fills me with delight. And maybe this is, again, Will should really be asking, if you do have a fourth leadership election in 3 years, then he should really be asking deep questions of the Conservative Party. And that requires the Conservative Party to have deep self-reflections upon itself. And I don't think Will is prepared to ask those type of questions. I don't think he's prepared to do that type of thing himself, because he would not maybe like the the reflection of the Conservative Party he would at least hope for on that front. But it continues, or at least, shall we say, we'll finish this off. But if Badenoch had at least consulted with Haig, he would have reminded her that that his party is an absolute monarchy moderated by regicide. Cue the dire straits. Will's not wrong on that. View of the party, that's for sure. Like I say, William Hague, removed as well. And that way, very, very quickly. You know, the Conservative Party always likes to pride itself on that if it has a bad leader, they get removed very quickly. And it looks like, you know, those gears might be turning to try and get rid of Kemi Badenoch. So let's finish this off then. Badenoch must, of course, prove she wants to actually fight to save the party. She at least loves, or her leadership and the Conservative Party is doomed. Yeah. And they talk about, again, like I say, the very first ever talks about Lib Dems I've ever seen in the conversation on Conservative Home. But I think the whole reason why that is the local conservatives in local conservative associations have started going out trying to get stuff motivated to start campaigning, you know, even start door knocking, you know, on some doors for local campaigns. And all of a sudden they're realizing last time he was conservative, he's now a Lib Dem. So is he. Where have all these Lib Dems come from? You know, I think that's what's happening. I wouldn't be surprised to find that out, to be honest, if that was some of the reports that they were getting from local conservative associations. But who knows? Maybe we'll find out sooner or later on that front. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.